All right, welcome back, everybody. We're doing the Parsha review. This week's Parsha is Parsha's Emor. And, I have no idea. I don't know. I wasn't in this room. I don't know. So this week's Parsha is Parsha's Emor. And it's the 8th portion of the book of Leviticus and the 31st portion in the Torah. There are 124 verses. There are 1,614 words and 6,106 letters. Again, why did we mention this? Like we a few minutes ago said, there's not an extra letter, word, verse in the Torah. If it's there for a reason. There's no fluff. All real, no fluff. There are 63 mitzvahs in this week's parsha. One of the most of all the portions in the Torah. There are 24 performative and 39 prohibitions, performative mitzvahs, meaning mitzvahs that we should do, that we should perform, and there are 39 prohibitions, mitzvahs that we receive for not doing certain sins, for certain actions. Okay, this overall in this week's parsha is the holiness of the priests and the holidays, and we're going to see them now. The Kohanim are commanded to avoid contact with corpses in order to maintain a high standard of ritual purity. So a Kohen cannot go into a room where there is a deceased body. You know, there's a great mitzvah. And those of you who are able to, in your respective Jewish communities, wherever you are around the world, volunteer. You should volunteer for the Chevra Kadisha. The Chevra Kadisha is the ritual burial society. And what you do is after someone passes away, they clean the body, they prepare it in the shrouds and put it in the casket in the most dignified and beautiful manner. And prepare the body, prepare this person for the ultimate day of judgment. It's a real lofty mitzvah. A Kohen can never do this mitzvah. A Kohen can never do this mitzvah. They can never perform this mitzvah. They may attend the funeral of only their 7 closest relatives: their father, the mother, their wife, their son, their daughter, brother, and unmarried sister. Those are the only 7 people that they're allowed to depurify themselves. They're allowed to be ritually impure for these 7. Otherwise, it is prohibited for them. In fact, in the Israeli hospitals, they have a special alarm. When someone's about to die, they sound the alarm. Kohanim, leave the building. Yeah, leave the building, because they can't be in the same building if they're under the same roof. It's problematic. Very problematic for a Kohen. So they actually keep them. They have a separate building that they keep bodies till they're being taken care of for burial. The Kohen Gadol, the high priest, may not attend the funeral of even his closest relatives. Those were regular Kohanim, the regular Kohen. But the high priest is not allowed to attend the funeral of even his closest relatives. Also, certain marital restrictions are placed on the Kohanim. The nation is required to honor the Kohanim. There is no equality in Judaism. There is a very clear tier system. This concept of equality is, I think, a very interesting one, the one that we have in our, I think we do need to have equality of opportunity, but there is never going to be equality of success, of results. That's not the way God created this world, and it's not the way it will ever be. But it is, and it's something we need to realize, that we're delusional in our culture if we think that there's ever going to be equality. There is no. I'll tell you what. Okay, you went to university. Did you go to university? Did you get accepted because you were Jewish? Right? What happened to affirmative action? It's only if you're a different color skin. Right? We had to struggle through what everyone else had to struggle, and we were slaves for much longer than they were. And we have we're a minority. We're a much smaller minority than anyone else on planet Earth. And we get no handouts. And we get no affirmative action. And we have to fight our way to the top. And we don't kvetch about it. And we don't complain. Where's the equality there? It's not fair. Imagine if we got the same opportunities. Imagine if we had the same opportunities. Would we succeed more? Probably less. And that's the irony. When you don't get the free handout and you realize that you have to work for your own success and you have to fight for it, then you take it much more seriously.
Rabbi, can I ask a question about the Kohen?
Sure.
How does the Kohen Gadol son automatically become?
No.
Is it how do they
the Kohen? Okay, fine. I'll tell you. Just start with a funny story that's told. Probably not a true story. A guy comes to a rabbi and he says to the rabbi, "Rabbi, I want you to make me a Kohen." You know, right? You didn't hear the story? I'll tell you the story. Don't ruin it. Don't ruin it for Wendy, right? So the rabbi says, "I'm sorry, I can't make you a Kohen." He says, "Rabbi, please, for the right money, can you make me a Kohen?" He says, "I can't make you a Kohen." He says, $10,000. I can't make you a Kohen. $50,000. Sorry, I still can't make you a Kohen. $100,000. Cannot make you a Kohen. 500. The rabbi's like, okay, just tell me, why do you want to become a Kohen so badly? He says, my father was a Kohen. My grandfather was a Kohen. I also want to be a Kohen, right? So, well, the reality is that if your father was a Kohen, you're a Kohen. That's the only way to be a Kohen. But to be a Kohen Gadol, you had to be selected.
Who selects?
The Kohanim. There was first is you had to be righteous enough for it, but you had to work your way up through the ranks to become one. There was no, I don't think there's ever been a Kohen Gadol who his son followed him to be a Kohen Gadol.
So did they vote on it?
It had to be yes.
It's like what they do with the
Pope, yeah.
The white smoke and the black smoke.
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Yeah,
hope
but
not.
they voted.
Lahavdil elf after to never compare between holy and unholy.
Is there only one Kohen Gadol at a time?
Only one. There's only one Kohen Gadol at a time. Yes.
Who's the
Yeah.
current?
What's that?
Who's the current?
Oh, there is none today. We don't have a temple.
Oh,
If we had a temple in Jerusalem, then we would have a Kohen Gadol. But today we sadly don't have a temple in Israel, in Jerusalem. And as soon as it'll be rebuilt, we will have a Kohen Gadol.
So maybe today it would be like the chief rabbi or something?
Well, so because we don't have a temple, I guess we bestow that honor or that leadership mantle on the leading Torah scholar.
He would be the chief rabbi.
Which would be, yeah, I guess it would be one of the chief rabbis. Yeah,
Okay.
that's very good. I hear that. Physical irregularities would invalidate a Kohen from serving in the temple. They are listed in the Torah, but I'm just to list a few here. If he had a limp, if he had a unibrow, if he had uneven limbs, if he had a right hand that was longer than his left hand, or vice versa, or right leg that was longer than his left leg, or vice versa, or any other types of, the Mishnah goes into many, many different abnormalities that would render a Kohen eligible for this leadership role. He had to be a perfect specimen. And there's a lot that the Mishnah talks about, the Torah talks about, and the Mishnah elaborates on it tremendously. Teruma is introduced in this week's Torah portion, and it's a produce tithe given to the Kohanim, and they may be eaten only by the Kohen and his family. If the family's neighbor came over, he can't eat from that tithe. It's holy. It's a holy tithe of the land that only goes to the Kohen and his family. The Kohanim, by the way, just so that you put it into perspective, they were very wealthy people. You know why? Because people tithed of their fields. They were getting full. Every offering that was brought, they had lots of meat every night. You should see that offering today. This guy must have sinned. No, they didn't say that. But they would slaughter these animals, and they'd have meat, and they'd have food, tremendous amounts of food, and they would also be given tithes of people's income. which is similar to what people do today. People give the tithe to their synagogue, or they give it to an organization like Torch, for example, right? Which assists in. Now we're not Kohen status wealth, right? We're just rabbis who make a humble income. An animal may be sacrificed in the temple after it is 8 days old and not earlier. You can't slaughter an animal that's younger than 8 days old, and it also has to be free of any physical blemishes. So, if the animal has a limp, you can't bring it to the temple. If the animal has blind on one eye, you can't bring it to the temple. You can't bring that offering to the temple. You need it to be also an animal that was blemish free. The nation is commanded to sanctify the name of Hashem by ensuring that their behavior was always exemplary, and by being prepared to surrender their lives rather than murder, engage in licentious relationships, or worship idols. These are called the 3 cardinal sins, right? This is the worst. Okay, let's go through this again. I want to make a declaration. Last week was Holocaust Memorial Day, Yom HaShoah. It's tragic. It's a tragic thing. It's something which is 1 day is not enough. 1 year wouldn't be enough to mourn the 6 million who were murdered. But I want you to know something very, very clearly. Every single Jew that was murdered by those evil, wicked people, we didn't call them people, those animals.
Creatures. Not even animals. That's too nice. Every
single Jew is on the highest, holiest level possible. Because why were they murdered?
Because they were Jewish.
That's the only reason. Because they were Jewish. They were murdered because they were Jewish. There's nothing more righteous than a person dying because of their relationship with God. Oh, but he may not have been observant. So what? He was taken because he was a Jew. It's the highest level of any Jew is someone who dies to sanctify God's name. And being a Jew, it didn't make a difference. One of the great Hasidic masters who survived the Holocaust in Auschwitz, he said, the most beautiful sight he's ever seen is when he and all of the other people in the camp were being marched through the barracks to their death. Now, some were sent to work work camps instead of to the gas chambers. He says, but when we walked together, we were all emaciated, hungry. None of us had beards. None of us had yarmulkes. Nobody knew he was a Rabbi of a big dynasty. Didn't make a difference. We were all just Jews. Nobody knew what anybody was. We were all just Jews. It's a very, very special thing. And the Jews, no matter where they were, they say, I remember I heard this when I was at Auschwitz. They said that the German soldiers knew the Shema by heart because they heard it hundreds of thousands of times. Every single Jew was yelling the Shema when their souls departed their body. That's the holy people, the Jewish people. Are we ready to give up our lives for being Jewish? You bet we are. We demonstrated it 6 million times. We are ready to give up our lives to say, yes, I'm Jewish and I'm not going to stand down from it. I'm not going to regret it, and I'm not going to hold back. That's what the mitzvah in this week's Parsha. Be willing to give up your life. If someone walked in here and said, serve this idol, or I shoot you in the head, you know what we do? Shoot me in the head. I'll take the bullet any day. I'm not going to serve your idol. I'm not going to disobey the commandment of my God. That's the first. The next is, if someone comes over to you and says, sleep with this woman, sleep with this man, and it's illegal, it's against halacha for us to sleep with that person, We're willing to take a bullet to our head and not to do that. And the last is worshiping idols. Okay? Oh, sorry, murder. Worshiping idols we said before. But murder. If they say kill that person or I kill you, we have to be willing to have our life taken and not murder another life. The Parsha continues. Festivals. Parsha talks about Pesach, the Omer, Shavuot, Rosh Hashanah, Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret. The special characteristics of the holidays are described. Sukkot, we sit in a sukkah, we shake a lulav. And Rosh Hashanah, a special time of new beginnings. Shavuot is the time of receiving the Torah. Pesach is the time where the Jewish people commemorate the Exodus from Egypt. Each one of these tremendous holidays are described in this week's Parsha. The special characteristics of the holidays are described. The nation is reminded not to do certain types of creative work during these holidays. So we know the misconception that people have, if you realize creative labor is certain types of creative work that are not permitted. People have this misconception about Shabbos. You're not allowed to work on Shabbos. It's not true. It's not what the Torah says. The Torah doesn't say you're not allowed to work. Those of you who've been around my Shabbos table know that we work very, very hard on Shabbos. That's work. It's like real work.
To what?
To host people, it's a lot of work. Sometimes moving around tables and chairs, that's work. Oh, you're not allowed to work on Shabbos. No, that's not what it says. It says you're not allowed to do creative labor. We translate that word incorrectly into English. Oh, you're not allowed to work. No, not allowed to do creative labor. So let me give you an example. If we had to move all of this furniture in this classroom into the next room, is that work? Yeah. That's work. But is it creative labor? No. Flicking on a light switch, is that work? No. Is it creative labor? Yes. You understand how we can have this misconception of what is permitted or prohibited on Shabbos. Creative labor is prohibited. Sparking a fire is creative labor. We're not allowed to do that on Shabbos. And I know you're going to ask me about the Tesla. Can we drive a Tesla on Shabbos? Because there's no igniting. With starting igniting an engine of a car is a biblical prohibition, because we're sparking a spark plug. You're igniting a fire, right? And every time you give gas, it's doing the same, right? So it's a big problem. A big question comes up of now with these electric cars that don't ignite a fire. There's no engine that turns on, of whether or not that's permitted, and it's an important question that needs to be addressed. It's not so simple, I'll tell you that. It's not so simple. New grain may not be eaten until the omer of barley is offered in the temple. And so there's a certain period of time that you cannot touch your new grain till the omer of barley is offered on the temple. The menorah, the Parsha explains the laws preparing the oil for the menorah and baking the lechem hapanim for the temple. The lechem hapanim were the showbread. The showbread were there from Friday to Friday, and they stayed fresh. I mean, you know what? How you touch hot challah, it's like yum, delicious. It stayed like that for 7 days, from Friday afternoon to Friday afternoon, until they took those off hot, piping hot, and placed the new challahs to stay there on the showbread for the coming. Then the kohanim could eat it. Then they can eat it. It was still fresh. Exactly, but that's exactly the miracle. We're going to start soon a new series. I told you we're going to start the teachings of Hasidus that I was just learning recently. Blow your mind. I'm learning now about food and why people get hungry. You know why someone gets hungry? Because they're really yearning for a connection to God. And food has godliness in it. Yeah, it's a whole concept that we have to explore. Very, very powerful. Don't feel bad. Don't feel bad that you eat a lot of food. Don't worry about it. It means that you want God in your life so much more.
Yeah, right, yeah.
I'm just trying to make myself feel good because I'm on a diet right now.
Some of the
So
rest of us too.
I'm on a diet. So a man blasphemed God and is executed as prescribed by the Torah. This is a story at the end of this week's Parsha. You're not allowed to curse at God. And if you do that, God forbid, someone did it in the Torah and they were taken out to the woodshed. No, they were taken out for good, like not the woodshed. So, my dear friends, have a magnificent, amazing, terrific Shabbos. It's already Wednesday. It's ready, right? And tonight is, well, last night was the 25th day of the Omer. So if you all rise, I will read, I will recite. Give me a second here. The Omer, counting of the Omer. Give me a second here. I'm going to stop the recording.